The silence in Ronda Rousey's Beverly Hills mansion was deafening that Tuesday morning. After months of grueling training camps and media obligations, the former UFC champion had finally returned home, expecting the familiar comfort of her sanctuary. But something felt different. The air carried an unusual tension, and Maria, her trusted housekeeper of 5 years, seemed to be avoiding eye contact. Ronda had always prided herself on reading people. It was a skill that served her well in the octagon and in life. Maria's nervous energy was impossible to ignore. The way she clutched her cleaning supplies, the hurried movements, the constant glancing toward the guest wing of the house. Something was happening in her own home, and Ronda was determined to find out what. That afternoon, as golden California sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Ronda made a decision that would change everything. She would follow Maria. Not out of suspicion or distrust, but because the woman who had become like family to her was clearly carrying a burden too heavy for one person to bear. Maria moved through the house with practiced efficiency, but today her routine was different. Instead of her usual path through the main living areas, she headed straight for the guest wing, a part of the house that had remained largely unused since Ronda's mother had moved to her own place nearby. The wooden floors creaked softly under Maria's feet as she navigated the hallway, unaware that Ronda was following at a safe distance, her fighter's instincts keeping her movements silent and undetected. The guest wing felt colder somehow, despite the warm Los Angeles weather outside. Ronda pressed herself against the wall as Maria stopped at the last door on the left, a room that Ronda rarely entered, furnished simply with a bed, dresser, and small sitting area. She watched as Maria knocked gently, a pattern of 3 soft taps followed by 2 harder ones. A code. Someone was living in her house without her knowledge. The door opened slowly, and Ronda's breath caught in her throat. A young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, peered out cautiously. Her dark hair was neatly braided, and she wore clothes that looked clean but worn. The child's eyes held a maturity that seemed far beyond her years, the kind of look Ronda had seen in her own reflection during her toughest fights. The look of someone who had faced challenges no child should ever have to face. Maria knelt down to the girl's level, speaking in hushed Spanish. Even without understanding every word, Ronda could hear the tenderness in Maria's voice, the careful way she spoke to avoid frightening the child. The girl nodded and stepped back into the room, allowing Maria to enter with a tray of food and what appeared to be school books. Ronda's mind raced. How long had this been going on? Who was this child? And why hadn't Maria felt comfortable enough to tell her? The questions multiplied with each passing second, but she forced herself to remain hidden, understanding instinctively that this situation required delicacy and patience, qualities she had learned to cultivate both in and out of the ring. Through the partially open door, Ronda could see Maria helping the girl with what looked like homework. The scene was tender and heartbreaking simultaneously. Maria, who had always been professional and somewhat reserved during their interactions, was transformed in this moment. She was gentle, nurturing, completely devoted to this child's well-being. It was clear that this wasn't just about providing shelter. Maria was caring for this girl as if she were her own daughter. The afternoon stretched on, and Ronda remained in her hiding spot, watching as Maria read to the child, helped her practice writing, and even played simple games to make her laugh. The sound of the girl's laughter was like music, but it was tinged with something that made Ronda's heart ache, a carefulness as if the child was afraid that too much joy might somehow be taken away from her. As evening approached, Maria began preparing to leave the room. She tucked the girl into bed with the same care Ronda remembered her own mother showing her as a child. The tenderness of the moment was overwhelming, and Ronda found herself fighting back tears she didn't fully understand. This woman, who cleaned her house and prepared her meals, was living a completely different life when Ronda wasn't around. A life centered on protecting and caring for a child who clearly needed her desperately. Maria finally emerged from the room, closing the door softly behind her. Ronda quickly retreated further down the hallway, her mind spinning with questions and emotions. She needed time to process what she had discovered before confronting Maria. This wasn't about betrayal or deception. This was about survival, protection, and love. The very qualities that had made Maria such a trusted presence in her home were now being extended to someone who needed them even more. That night, Ronda lay awake staring at the ceiling of her master bedroom, unable to shake the image of the young girl's face. There was something familiar about her features, something that nagged at the edges of Ronda's memory. The way she held herself, the shape of her eyes, even the careful way she moved. It all seemed to echo someone Ronda had known, but she couldn't quite place who. The next morning brought no relief from the questions that had kept her awake. Ronda moved through her usual routine, morning workout, protein shake, review of training footage, but her heart wasn't in it. Every sound from the guest wing drew her attention. Every glimpse of Maria carrying supplies in that direction made her chest tighten with a mixture of curiosity and concern. By midday, Ronda had made another decision. She would continue following Maria, but this time she would be more systematic about it. She needed to understand the full scope of the situation before taking any action. The fighter in her demanded a complete assessment of the circumstances, while the human in her simply wanted to help in whatever way she could. Maria's second visit to the guest wing revealed even more heartbreaking details. The child was clearly being homeschooled, with Maria serving as her teacher, caregiver, and protector all at once. The dedication was extraordinary, but Ronda could see the toll it was taking on Maria. The woman looked exhausted, stretched thin between her official duties and this secret responsibility that consumed her heart and energy. During this second observation session, Ronda noticed something that made her blood run cold. The girl had a small scar on her left temple, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. But Ronda knew that scar. She had seen it before, in photographs that had been shown to her months ago by a private investigator she had hired for a completely different purpose. The pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed began falling into place with terrifying clarity. The child wasn't just any child Maria was helping. This was Isabella Santos, the daughter of Carlos Santos, Maria's brother who had disappeared 6 months ago after getting involved with dangerous people in East Los Angeles. The same Carlos Santos who had been trying to protect his daughter from men who wanted to use her as leverage against him. The same little girl who had vanished from the foster care system and had been presumed either kidnapped or worse. Maria hadn't just been hiding a child in Ronda's house. She had been protecting her own niece from people who would stop at nothing to find her. The weight of this realization hit Ronda like a physical blow. Maria had been carrying this enormous burden alone, risking everything to keep Isabella safe, all while maintaining the facade of normalcy in her daily work. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the guest wing as Ronda processed this revelation. Maria's behavior over the past months suddenly made perfect sense. The occasional phone calls she took in Spanish while looking worried. The requests for time off that she never fully explained. The way she sometimes seemed distracted even while performing her duties flawlessly. She had been living a double life, and the stress of it was clearly wearing on her. As Ronda watched Maria help Isabella with her reading, she noticed other details that painted a fuller picture of their situation. The child's clothes, while clean, were clearly hand-me-downs. The books Maria used for lessons were old library copies, probably purchased at used book sales. Despite having access to Ronda's considerable resources, Maria had been trying to handle everything on her own, probably out of fear that involving anyone else might put Isabella in greater danger. The love between aunt and niece was evident in every interaction. Isabella looked at Maria with complete trust and adoration, while Maria's entire demeanor softened whenever she was with the child. It was clear that Maria would do anything to protect Isabella, even if it meant risking her job, her security, and potentially her own safety. As the day wore on, Ronda found herself thinking about her own relationship with family, about the people who had protected and supported her throughout her career. She thought about the sacrifices her mother had made, the risks her trainers had taken to help her succeed, and the loyalty of people like Maria who had become part of her extended family. The parallel was impossible to ignore. Maria was doing for Isabella exactly what so many people had done for Ronda throughout her life. The emotional weight of the discovery was overwhelming, but it also brought clarity. Ronda knew she couldn't continue to observe from the shadows. The situation was too serious, the stakes too high, and Maria's burden too heavy for one person to carry alone. But she also knew that approaching this delicately would be crucial. One wrong move could shatter the fragile safety that Maria had created for Isabella, potentially putting both of them in danger. That evening, As Maria tucked Isabella into bed once again, Ronda made a decision that would change all of their lives. She would reveal what she knew, but she would do it in a way that offered help rather than judgment, support rather than consequences. The fighter in her recognized a battle worth joining, and the human in her couldn't stand by while people she cared about faced such overwhelming challenges alone. The stage was set for a conversation that would test every relationship in the house, but also create the possibility for something beautiful. A family forged not by blood alone, but by choice, courage, and unconditional love. If this story is touching your heart the way it's touching mine, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because what happens next will completely change how you see the power of family. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think Ronda should do in this impossible situation. And don't forget to smash that like button to help this story reach people who need to hear it. Please confirm with OK or continue to proceed with the final 2 chapters where the truth comes out and lives are forever changed. OK, Claude 4. Sonnet, Claude 4. Sonnet, second block. Chapters 3 and 4. The morning light filtered through the kitchen windows as Ronda sat at her granite island, nursing her 3rd cup of coffee. She had barely slept, her mind replaying every detail of what she had witnessed. The sound of Maria's keys in the front door made her heart race. Today would be the day everything changed. Maria entered the kitchen with her usual quiet efficiency, but Ronda could see the exhaustion etched in the lines around her eyes. The woman who had always seemed unshakable now appeared fragile, carrying invisible weight that threatened to crush her spirit. "Maria," Ronda said softly, her voice cutting through the morning silence. "We need to talk." The color drained from Maria's face instantly. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down her purse, and Ronda could see the fear flooding her features. It was the look of someone whose carefully constructed world was about to crumble. "I know about Isabella," Ronda continued, her tone gentle but firm. "I know she's been staying in the guest wing, and I know you've been taking care of her." Maria's composure finally broke. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her shoulders shaking with the weight of months of hidden stress and fear. "Please, Miss Ronda," she whispered, her accent thicker with emotion. "Please don't call the authorities. She has nowhere else to go. Those men, they're still looking for her." Ronda moved around the island and knelt beside Maria's chair, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I'm not going to call anyone, Maria. I want to help, but I need to understand everything. The whole truth." Through broken sobs and halting words, Maria told her story. Carlos, her younger brother, had gotten involved with a drug trafficking organization in East Los Angeles. When he tried to leave, they threatened Isabella as leverage to keep him in line. Carlos had managed to get Isabella into foster care before he disappeared, but the men had connections everywhere. They had been systematically checking foster homes, getting closer to finding her. "The social worker, she was a friend of my cousin," Maria explained, wiping her eyes with a tissue Ronda had handed her. "She called me in the middle of the night, said they had to move Isabella immediately. These men, they had found out which home she was in. I didn't think, I just knew I had to protect her." Ronda listened without judgment as Maria described the terrifying night 6 months ago, when she had picked up Isabella from an emergency safe house. The child had been traumatized, barely speaking, clutching a small stuffed elephant that was her only remaining connection to her father. "I brought her here because I knew she would be safe," Maria continued. "Your security system, the gated community, I thought it would just be for a few days until we could find somewhere else. But the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Every time I tried to make other arrangements, something would happen. They would get close to finding her again." The full scope of Maria's sacrifice became clear as she spoke. She had been using her own savings to buy Isabella's clothes, books, and food. She had been teaching her during the day and working her regular hours for Ronda in the evenings and early mornings. She had been living on 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, driven by love and desperation to keep her niece safe. "Where is Carlos now?" Ronda asked gently. Maria's face crumpled again. "We don't know. He hasn't contacted us in 4 months. The last message he sent said he was trying to find a way to make this right, to get these men to leave Isabella alone. But then, nothing." Ronda felt a surge of protective anger toward people she had never met, but who had torn this family apart. She thought about her own experiences with bullies and predators, people who used fear and violence to control others. The fighter in her wanted to take action immediately, but she knew this situation required strategy and careful planning. "Maria, you should have told me," Ronda said, though her tone held no accusation. "We could have figured this out together. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." "I was so scared," Maria admitted. "Scared you would fire me, scared you would make us leave, scared that involving you would put you in danger too. These are not good people, Miss Ronda. They hurt anyone who gets in their way." Ronda stood up, her mind already working through possibilities. "Take me to see Isabella. It's time we all had an honest conversation." The walk to the guest wing felt different now that everything was out in the open. Maria's steps were slower, heavier with the weight of revelation, while Ronda's were purposeful and determined. When they reached Isabella's door, Maria knocked with the familiar pattern, but this time her voice shook as she called out in Spanish. Isabella opened the door cautiously, her large brown eyes immediately focusing on Ronda with a mixture of curiosity and fear. She was smaller than Ronda had realized from her distant observations, more fragile looking, but there was an unmistakable strength in the way she held herself. "Isabella, this is Miss Ronda," Maria said in English, her voice carefully controlled. "She owns this house and she knows you've been staying here." The child's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. She stepped back into the room, her eyes filling with tears, and began gathering her few belongings with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned that safety was always temporary. "No, sweetheart," Ronda said, kneeling down to Isabella's eye level. "You don't have to pack anything. You're not going anywhere unless you want to." Isabella paused, clutching her stuffed elephant tightly. "You're not going to send me away?" "Never," Ronda said firmly. "This is your home now for as long as you need it to be." The conversation that followed was unlike anything Ronda had ever experienced. Isabella, despite her young age, understood far more about her situation than any child should have to. She spoke about her father with a mixture of love and sadness, about the scary men who had made them run, and about how Maria had become her whole world. "Tia Maria reads to me every night," Isabella said, using the Spanish word for aunt. "She teaches me math and science and she makes the best scrambled eggs. But sometimes I hear her crying when she thinks I'm asleep." Ronda's heart broke a little more with each detail. This child had been forced to grow up too fast, to understand adult fears and dangers, but she had also been surrounded by Maria's unwavering love and protection. As the afternoon progressed, Ronda began to see the full picture of the life Maria and Isabella had built together in secret. The guest room had been transformed into a makeshift classroom and sanctuary. Drawings covered one wall, Isabella's artwork showing houses with big gardens, families holding hands, and always a woman who looked like Maria standing protectively nearby. "I want to help," Ronda told them both as they sat together on Isabella's bed. "But I need to know everything about these men who are looking for you. I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." Maria hesitated, clearly torn between her desire to protect Ronda and her desperate need for help. Finally, she pulled out her phone and showed Ronda a series of text messages and photos that painted a terrifying picture of the organization that had destroyed her family. The men weren't just local criminals. They were part of a sophisticated network with connections throughout Southern California. They had been systematically tracking down anyone connected to Carlos, using intimidation and violence to gather information. Maria had been receiving threatening messages for months, warnings that they knew she was hiding something, and that they would find Isabella eventually. "They've been watching the house," Maria admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen the same car parked on the street 3 times this month. They're getting closer." Ronda felt a chill run down her spine. The idea that dangerous people had been surveilling her property, potentially putting not just Isabella and Maria at risk, but also threatening her own security, filled her with a cold rage she hadn't felt since her fighting days. "Why didn't you tell me about the surveillance?" Ronda asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "Because I knew you would want to fight them," Maria said with a sad smile. "And I couldn't bear the thought of you getting hurt because of our problems." That evening, after Isabella had gone to sleep, Ronda and Maria sat in the kitchen planning their next moves. Ronda had already contacted her security team and her lawyer, setting in motion a series of actions that would either solve their problem or escalate it dramatically. "I'm going to hire the best private investigators in the city," Ronda explained. "We're going to find out everything about these men, who they are, where they operate, what they want, and we're going to find Carlos. What if he's—" Maria couldn't finish the sentence. "Then we'll deal with that too," Ronda said firmly. "But we're not going to assume the worst until we know for sure. And regardless of what happened to Carlos, Isabella belongs here now. She belongs with us." The word "us" hung in the air between them, carrying weight and promise that neither woman had expected. Somewhere in the space of a single day, they had gone from employer and employee to something much deeper, partners in protecting a child who had become precious to both of them. Over the following weeks, Ronda's team worked tirelessly to unravel the mystery of Carlos Santos and the organization that had torn his family apart. What they discovered was both better and worse than anyone had imagined. Carlos was alive, but he was in federal protective custody, working with law enforcement to bring down the very people who had threatened his daughter. The reunion between Carlos and Isabella took place in Ronda's living room on a sunny Thursday afternoon, with federal agents positioned discreetly around the property. The moment father and daughter saw each other again was one that would stay with Ronda forever. Pure joy mixed with relief, love stronger than fear, and the kind of healing that only family can provide. But the story didn't end with the reunion. Carlos's cooperation with federal authorities had indeed made Isabella a target, but it had also provided the evidence needed to dismantle the organization that had terrorized their family. The arrest that followed made national news, and suddenly Isabella was safe in a way she hadn't been since she was a small child. Carlos, grateful beyond words for everything Ronda and Maria had done, made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of taking Isabella away to start over somewhere else, he asked if they could all stay together. The house that had become Isabella's sanctuary could become their permanent home, with Carlos contributing his skills as a carpenter to help maintain the property, and Maria continuing in her role as both housekeeper and the heart of their unconventional family. Ronda's answer was immediate and wholehearted. The house that had once felt too big and too quiet was now filled with laughter, conversation, and the kind of warmth that only comes from people who have chosen to love and protect each other. Months later, as Ronda watched Isabella play in the backyard while Carlos built her a treehouse and Maria prepared dinner in the kitchen, she reflected on how completely her life had changed. The discovery that had begun with silent footsteps and hidden doors had led to something she had never expected. A family bound not by blood but by choice, courage, and unconditional love. Isabella, now thriving in a local school and making friends for the first time in years, had taught them all about resilience and hope. Carlos had brought a sense of completion to their family, his gratitude and dedication adding strength to their bond. And Maria, no longer carrying her burden alone, had blossomed into the confident, joyful woman she had always been beneath the weight of her fears. The guest wing was no longer a hiding place, but a true home, filled with Isabella's artwork, her father's woodworking projects, and Maria's plants that now grew freely in the abundant sunlight. The house that had once been Ronda's private retreat had become something much more valuable, a place where love conquered fear, where family was defined by choice rather than circumstance, and where the simple act of following someone you care about could lead to discovering everything you never knew you needed. As the sun set over Beverly Hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Ronda knew that her greatest victory hadn't happened in any octagon or arena. It had happened in the quiet moments of choosing to care, to act, and to open her heart to people who needed her as much as she needed them. The tears that had come from discovering Maria's secret had been just the beginning. The real joy came from building something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of fear and separation. The story of how Ronda Rousey followed her housekeeper and discovered a hidden family had become the story of how four people found each other and chose to create something stronger than any of them could have built alone. This incredible journey shows us that sometimes the most life-changing discoveries happen when we choose to pay attention to the people around us. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because there are so many more inspiring true stories waiting to be told. Share your thoughts in the comments about what family means to you, And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to help spread this message of hope and love. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need to hear them most.